The gavel was about to fall. In New York's most sensational divorce, billionaire Julian Thorne was moments away from financial victory. He had painted his wife, Elena, as a gold digger, testifying under oath that no prenup existed. His high-powered lawyers smirked, the press scribbled, and Elena Thorne sat pale and silent. The judge picked up her pen to sign the order, a pittance of a settlement. "Any final objections?" the judge asked. A mere formality. Elena's lawyer stood up. "Yes, Your Honor." And in that moment, the entire case, a $5 billion empire, and Julian Thorne's entire life came undone. Because Elena just pulled out a document with his signature, the air in courtroom 3B of the New York County Supreme Court was not just conditioned, it was refrigerated, chilled to a temperature that was supposed to keep the lawyers sharp and the emotions numb. On this Tuesday, it was failing. The room was packed, a suffocating mix of expensive perfume, nervous sweat, and the faint, dusty smell of legal volumes. This was the finale of Thorne versus Thorne, the divorce that had dominated the city's gossip pages for 6 brutal months. At the respondents' table sat Julian Thorne, founder and CEO of Auratech, a man whose net worth hovered around the $5 billion mark. He wasn't just rich, he was New York rich. His suit, a custom charcoal grey Xenia, probably cost more than the court stenographer's car. Beside him, his lead counsel, Robert "Bobby" Kincaid, shuffled his papers with the bored confidence of a predator who had already cornered his prey. Kincaid was a shark in a $10,000 suit, known for dismantling witnesses and charming judges. At the petitioner's table sat Elena Thorne. If Julian was a monument of polished steel, Elena was a watercolor painting left in the rain. She wore a simple navy blue dress, her dark hair pulled back in a severe bun that highlighted the exhaustion around her eyes. She looked, as Kincaid had intended for the press to see her, like a woman thoroughly out of her league. Beside her sat Marcus Cole, a lawyer whose quiet demeanor and public defender-style suits were the polar opposite of Kincaid's courtroom theater. "And so, Your Honor," Kincaid was booming, his voice filling the room, "we see a clear pattern. A woman who entered this marriage with nothing, who contributed nothing to the staggering success of Auratech, and who now, in its final days, seeks to plunder it." Elena flinched, but Marcus Cole placed a steadying hand on her arm. "Mr. Thorne," Kincaid continued, turning to his client, "has been extraordinarily generous. His offer of a $5 million lump sum, plus the upstate property, is, frankly, magnanimous. Mrs. Thorne's countersuit for 50% of his assets is not just baseless, it's an insult to the court." Judge Elizabeth Harding, a woman with 20 years on the bench and zero patience for theatrics, looked down from on high. "Mr. Kincaid, the insult is irrelevant. What is relevant is the law. New York is an equitable distribution state. The debate is over what is equitable." "Mr. Cole," she said, turning to Elena's lawyer, "your client's claim hinges on the assertion that she was an integral partner in Auratech's founding. Mr. Kincaid has just presented satellite imagery, proving the corporate campus was built 5 years after your client ceased all formal employment. She was a supportive spouse, Your Honor, a co-founder in spirit," Marcus argued, but his voice sounded thin, even to himself. "A co-founder in spirit is not a legal designation, counsel," Judge Harding said, her tone sharp. "What I am not seeing is any formal agreement, any contract, any prenuptial arrangement." This was the kill shot. Kincaid had been building to this. "Exactly, Your Honor," Kincaid said, stepping forward. "And to put this matter to rest, I would like to call Mr. Julian Thorne back to the stand for one final declaration." Julian rose, smoothed his suit, and walked to the stand. He was sworn in. Kincaid paced before him. "Mr. Thorne, we have heard 6 months of testimony, but let's be clear for the record. Was there at any point during your 15-year marriage any document, contract, or agreement? Specifically, a prenuptial agreement? Signed by you and Mrs. Thorne?" Julian looked directly at Eleanor. His eyes, the color of a winter sky, were cold and dismissive. He gave a small, sad smile, as if this all pained him. "No, Bobby. Never," Julian said, his voice resonating with false sincerity. "I loved Elena. When we got married, I wanted no barriers between us. Everything I had was hers, and everything she had was mine. The idea of a prenup, it was offensive to me. We never, ever signed one." He was lying. It was a clean, perfect, devastating lie. Elena's hands trembled, and she looked down at her lap. "Thank you, Mr. Thorne. A clear declaration," Kincaid said, turning to the judge. "Your Honor, Mr. Thorne has testified under oath. There is no prenup. The marriage is, unfortunately, broken. We ask the court to deny the petitioner's outlandish claim and finalize the divorce based on Mr. Thorne's generous standing offer." Judge Harding sighed. This was it. The fight was over. She had seen this 100 times. The powerful man, the discarded wife, the convenient lack of paperwork. Her hands rested on the file. "Mr. Cole," the judge said, her voice heavy with finality. "Do you have any evidence to refute Mr. Thorne's sworn testimony? Anything at all?" Marcus Cole looked at Elena. She gave a single, almost imperceptible nod. The fear was still there, but beneath it was a core of cold, hard diamond. This was the moment they had waited for. They had let Julian build his entire case on this one, central, provable lie. They had let him commit perjury in open court. Marcus Cole stood up. His spine, which had seemed to be bending all morning, was now a steel rod. "Yes, Your Honor. We do." A murmur went through the courtroom. Kincaid, who had been packing his briefcase, froze. Julian's smug smile wavered. "Your Honor," Marcus Cole said, his voice suddenly clear and strong. "The defense is correct about one thing. This case does hinge on a prenuptial agreement. Mr. Kincaid claims one doesn't exist. Mr. Thorne has just sworn, under oath, that one doesn't exist." He paused, letting the silence stretch. "This is, therefore, a very awkward moment for Mr. Thorne, because the petitioner would like to submit into evidence the prenuptial agreement, signed by Mr. Julian Thorne on May 14, 2010, and notarized by Mr. Gerald Finch." Marcus lifted a document from his briefcase. It was old, the pages slightly yellowed, but it was impeccably preserved in a clear plastic legal binder. He walked slowly, deliberately, to the clerk. "Objection!" Kincaid roared, leaping to his feet. This is ambush. This is a fraudulent document. It's 11th hour desperation." "It's an 11th hour revelation, Mr. Kincaid," Marcus said calmly. "We were waiting for your client to perjure himself, which he has now done. Spectacularly." Julian Thorne had gone rigid. The color drained from his face, leaving a pasty, grey mask. He was staring at the document in the clerk's hand, as if it were a snake. Judge Harding, her eyes wide, banged her gavel. "Order! Order! Mr. Kincaid, you will sit. Mr. Cole, you will approach the bench. And this court," she said, her gaze fixed on the document, "will take a 1-hour recess." As she swept from the room, the courtroom exploded into chaos. Julian Thorne grabbed Kincaid by the arm, his voice a furious whisper. "You told me she had nothing. You told me it was gone." Elena Thorne simply sat, took a deep breath, and for the first time in a year, met her husband's furious, panicked gaze from across the room. The gamble had been taken. The trap was sprung. The recess was chaos. Julian, Bobby Kincaid, and 2 junior associates had commandeered a conference room. "What is this?" Julian hissed, slamming his palm on the polished mahogany table. "A fake? A forgery?" "It looked real," Kincaid snapped, loosening his tie. "The notary stamp. The letterhead. It's old. She's been holding this. She's been planning this." "It doesn't matter," Julian said, his mind racing, the initial shock already hardening into strategy. "So it's real. Who cares? It's 15 years old. We were kids. It probably gives her the cat and my student loan debt. This is nothing. A procedural delay." "Don't be a fool, Julian," Kincaid said, his earlier smugness gone. "Nobody pulls a stunt like that unless the document says something. They let you perjure yourself. This isn't about the existence of the prenup anymore. It's about what's in it." When Judge Harding returned to the bench, the atmosphere in the courtroom had shifted from a funeral to a high-voltage execution. The air crackled. "I have reviewed the document submitted by the petitioner," Judge Harding began, her voice cold. "It appears to be a valid, notarized prenuptial agreement. Mr. Kincaid, your client, Mr. Thorne, has just testified that no such document exists. This places Mr. Thorne in a position of grave legal peril. This places you in an awkward position, Mr. Kincaid. Were you aware of this document?" "Absolutely not, Your Honor," Kincaid said, trying to regain his footing. "We were completely blindsided, and we contend this document is a forgery, a desperate, last-minute fabrication." "A fabrication, Mr. Kincaid?" Marcus Cole spoke up, his calm a stark contrast to Kincaid's bluster. "That's a very serious accusation, one that will require forensic analysis, which we welcome." "Mr. Cole," the judge interrupted, "assuming for a moment this document is authentic, what are its terms? Why has it become the central pillar of your case?" Marcus nodded, opening his own copy. "Your Honor, the agreement is, for the most part, a standard what's yours is yours, what's mine is mine contract. It was signed when Mr. Thorne was a graduate student with significant debt, and Mrs. Thorne was a marketing associate with a small 401k and a paid-off sedan. It was, in fact, designed to protect her assets from his business creditors." A ripple of laughter went through the press gallery. Julian's jaw tightened. "However," Marcus continued, "Mrs. Thorne insisted on the inclusion of one specific, non-standard clause. Page 4, Section 3, the breach of trust clause." He read, "In the event of a marital dissolution resulting directly from a proven act of infidelity on the part of Julian Thorne, the standard asset division is rendered void. In such an event, 70% of all marital assets, including all shares, properties, and liquid holdings acquired during the marriage, shall be awarded to Elena Thorne." Silence. Julian Thorne stopped breathing. Kincaid looked as if he'd been punched. "It goes on," Marcus said quietly. "Furthermore, controlling interest in any passion project or subsidiary company founded during the marriage, specifically any venture conceptualized by both parties, will transfer in its entirety to Elena Thorne." Kincaid found his voice. That's barbaric. That's a lifestyle clause. They're not enforceable in New York." "They absolutely are, Mr. Kincaid, when tied to egregious conduct that results in the dissolution of the marriage, especially when the dissipation of marital assets is involved," Marcus countered smoothly. "And we are prepared to argue that Mr. Thorne's affair was not just a personal failing, but a financial one." Julian was on his feet. "This is insane. She's making this up. I never agreed to that. I would never. You signed it, Julian." Elena's voice, though quiet, cut through the entire courtroom. It was the first time she had spoken directly to him in months. You signed it and you laughed. And with that, the memory, pristine and terrible, returned to them both. Flashback, May 14th, 2010. A cramped studio apartment in Astoria, Queens. The room smelled of pepperoni pizza and damp drywall. Julian, then 24, was vibrating with energy, sketching code on a pizza box. Elena, 23, was sitting on their floor mattress, sorting a pile of bills. "This is stupid, Ellie," Julian said, scribbling his signature on the last page of the document. "We're never getting divorced." "It's not stupid," she said, countersigning. "It's just paperwork. My mum told me to. Your aura idea is brilliant, but you're $200,000 in debt to your uncle. If it goes bust, I don't want them taking my Honda." "Fair enough," he laughed. He flipped back to page 4. "What's this? Breach of trust? Infidelity?" He raised an eyebrow. "Seriously?" "That's the non-negotiable part," Elena said, not looking up from the bills. "My dad. Well, you know what he did to my mum. He left her with nothing. Not a penny. I need to know that if that ever happened, I'm protected." Julian knelt in front of her. He was impossibly handsome, with a dreamer's fire in his eyes. He tilted her chin up. "Hey, look at me. I'm not your dad. I'm not that guy. This Elysium idea," he said, tapping a different notebook. "Our passion project. This is our future. You and me. Always." He signed the page with a flourish. "There, signed. Happy? Now we just need Mr. Finch," she said, feeling relieved. "That old guy from the copy shop?" Julian scoffed. "Fine, let's go get it notarized. Then we can get back to changing the world." He had signed it without a second thought. Because, at the time, he had nothing. And he never, in his wildest dreams, imagined she would have the steel to keep it. He certainly never imagined she would have the nerve to use it. "Your Honor," Julian stammered, his mask of control shattering. This is a character assassination. I did not commit adultery. This is a fantasy. She has no proof." "That," Judge Harding said, her eyes now gleaming with intense interest, "is what the rest of this trial will determine. Mr. Kincaid, your forgery claim just got much more complicated. And Mr. Thorne," she said, fixing him with a stare, "I would remind you that you are still under oath. And now so is your entire defense. We will adjourn until Thursday. I want forensics on this signature, Mr. Kincaid. And Mr. Cole," she added, "you better be ready to prove Section 3. Julian Thorne stormed out of the courtroom, his face a mask of purple rage. He had walked in that morning expecting to write a $5 million check and walk away with his girlfriend and his $5 billion empire. He now stood to lose everything, all because of a 15-year-old signature, laughed off over a greasy pizza box, and a wife he had underestimated at every turn. The trial, once a simple financial dispute, had morphed into a high-stakes forensic investigation. The first battle, the signature. Bobby Kincaid, recovering from the initial shock, went on the offensive. He hired the best. Dr. Evelyn Reed, a forensic document examiner with a client list that included 2 NFL teams and a U.S. senator, took the stand. She was impressive, with charts, microphotography, and a confident, professorial tone. She spent a day tearing the signature apart. "The pen pressure is inconsistent," she declared, pointing to a giant projection of Julian's signature. "You see here, the J loop is confident, but the T crossbar shows hesitation. This is indicative of a tracing signature, someone drawing a name they have practiced, not writing their own." "And the ink?" Kincaid prompted. "The ink is problematic. It shows signs of artificial aging, Dr. Reed explained. The chemical composition is consistent with inks available today, but it has been treated, baked perhaps, or exposed to UV light to mimic the oxidation of a 15-year-old document. So, in your expert opinion, Dr. Reed? In my professional opinion, the signature of Julian Thorne on this document is a masterful but clear forgery. The courtroom buzzed. Julian Thorne permitted himself a small, vindicated smile. He glanced at Eleanor. Your move. Marcus Cole's cross-examination was brief. Dr. Reed, you were paid. What is your standard fee? $25,000 for this report? My fees are my business, counsel. And you testify primarily for high net worth individuals, almost always for the defense? I testify for the truth. You said the J loop was confident and the T crossbar showed hesitation. Couldn't that also be indicative of someone signing on an uneven surface? Like, say, a coffee table in a small apartment. It's possible, but my conclusion stands. No further questions, Marcus said. Judge Harding looked at him. Mr. Cole, your entire case rests on this document. Your opponent has just had a renowned expert label it a fake. You need more than it was a wobbly table. We have more, Your Honor, Marcus said. We have the notary. And where is this notary? This Mr. Finch? That, Your Honor, has been the problem. We have been searching for him. The hunt for Gerald Finch had been a nightmare. He wasn't a high-profile legal professional. He was a man who had run a Mail and More shop in Astoria. The shop had closed in 2012. Elena's team, led by their private investigator David Chen, had hit a series of dead ends. Chen was a former NYPD detective with a bloodhound's patience. He started with the notary license. It had expired in 2013. The forwarding address on the business lease was a P.O. box, long since closed. He's a ghost, Chen reported to Marcus and Eleanor a week earlier in their cramped temporary law office. Social Security is being paid out, but it's direct deposit to a bank that's since been acquired by a larger conglomerate. There's no driver's license, no property ownership in the tri-state area. He has to be somewhere, David, Elena had insisted, her voice tight with stress. He was an old man then. He must be in his late 70s, maybe 80s now. That's what I'm thinking, Chen said. He's not living on his own. He's not using credit cards. He's either in a facility or he's deceased. If he's dead, we're dead, Marcus said flatly. It's our expert versus their expert, and their expert is more expensive. A jury will call it a draw, and the judge will default to standard distribution. The prenup gets tossed. Chen went back to the only lead he had, the bank. He spent 2 days working his old police contacts, cutting through red tape until he got a bank manager to look up the source of the direct deposit. The Social Security checks were deposited monthly, and then, 3 days later, an automatic payment was made from that account. It was a payment to Rosewood Gardens Assisted Living in Medford, Oregon. He's alive, Chen said, dialing Marcus. But he's 2,500 miles away. Mr. Finch is 81 years old, Your Honor, Marcus explained to the judge. He is in an assisted living facility in Oregon. He is not well enough to travel. However, he is willing to testify. Kincaid shot up. Objection. A surprise witness? Who's in a nursing home? It's a delaying tactic. For all we know, he's senile. He is not senile, Mr. Kincaid. He has good days and bad, Marcus said. But he remembers. We are requesting a live video deposition to be streamed here in this courtroom tomorrow. Judge Harding considered this. The battle of experts had left her in a bind. The notary was the only tiebreaker. Mr. Kincaid, your expert claims the document is a fake. Their witness claims to have notarized it. I want to hear from this witness. The motion is granted. Tomorrow, 9 a.m., we will hear from Mr. Gerald Finch. Julian Thorne was furious. Find out everything about this Rosewood Gardens, he snarled to Kincaid as they left. Find a nurse. Find a doctor. I want to know exactly how lucid this old man is. The next morning, a large television screen was wheeled into the courtroom. At exactly 9:03 a.m., the screen flickered to life. The image was of a pleasant, sunlit room. Sitting in a comfortable armchair, a plaid blanket over his knees, was Gerald Finch. He was thin, with wispy white hair and large, thick-rimmed glasses that magnified his pale blue eyes. He looked frail, but his gaze was sharp. "Mr. Finch," Judge Harding said, her voice gentle. "Can you hear me clearly?" "Yes, ma'am, I can." His voice crackled over the speakers, clear as a bell. He was sworn in. Marcus Cole began. "Mr. Finch, thank you for joining us. My name is Marcus Cole. I'd like to take you back to the year 2010. Do you recall, in that year, running a shop called Mail & More in Astoria, Queens?" "I do," he smiled. "Ran it for 25 years. Good little business." "And you were a public notary?" "Yes, sir. Since 1985. Marcus had the court clerk show Mr. Finch the prenup, holding it up to the camera. "Mr. Finch, I am showing you a document. Can you see your notary stamp and signature on the final page?" Finch squinted. "It's a bit fuzzy, yes." "Yes, that's my stamp. That's my signature. Gerald S. Finch. That's me." Kincaid was already on his feet. "Objection. He's just identifying a picture of his own name. It proves nothing." "Sustained." "Mr. Cole, get to the point," said the judge. "Mr. Finch," Marcus continued, "I want you to look at the petitioners. Do you remember either of the people who signed this document with you that day?" Gerald Finch looked intently. He stared at Julian, who offered a small, patronizing smile. He stared at Elena, who was holding her breath. Finch frowned. He looked confused. "Son, it was a long time ago. I notarized thousands of documents. Leases, wills, nice people, most of them. But their faces, I'm afraid I don't recall these specific people." Elena's heart sank into her stomach. Kincaid leaned back, a triumphant smirk spreading across his face. "He doesn't remember, Mr. Cole," Kincaid called out. "This is a waste of time." "Mr. Kincaid, you are on a very short leash," the judge warned. Marcus Cole walked over to Eleanor. "It's okay," he whispered. "This is what we prepared for." When Marcus and Eleanor had flown to Oregon 2 days prior, this exact moment had happened. Finch, sitting in that same sunny room, had apologized. "I'm so sorry, dear. I can't place you." Eleanor had been devastated. But as they were about to leave, she had been idly rubbing a small silver ring on her right hand. It was a simple band with a single milk-white opal. Finch had suddenly pointed. "The ring." "What?" Eleanor asked. "Your ring. That's not a diamond. It's an opal. I remember that ring." Now in the courtroom, Marcus Cole said, "Mr. Finch, you may not remember my client's face, but do you remember anything about her? Anything she was wearing?" Finch's eyes drifted, searching his memory. Then they focused, crystal clear, on Eleanor's hand, which was resting on the table. "Yes," he said, his voice suddenly stronger. I remember. Her ring. The opal. I remember it clear as day." Eleanor raised her hand for the camera to see. "I remember," Finch continued, a small smile playing on his lips, "because I told her it was bad luck to have an opal for an engagement. My grandmother always said so, and she laughed. She said, 'I make my own luck, Mr. Finch.'" Elena let out a shaky breath. "And I remember him," Finch said, his gaze shifting to Julian. Julian's smile vanished. He was impatient, Finch said. He was tapping his foot, kept looking at his watch. But he wasn't wearing one. He just kept tapping his wrist. He was arrogant, talked about big ideas, about changing the world. He treated me like I was a speed bump. And the document, Mr. Finch. Do you remember the document itself? Marcus pressed. I do. Because it was unusual, a prenup. These kids, they looked like they didn't have 2 nickels to rub together. And she was insistent on this one part. I had to re-stamp it, because she added an initial, a breach clause. I remember because I'd never seen one written like that. I read it, and I looked at him, and I thought, young man, you better walk the line. And the signature, Mr. Finch? Marcus asked, his voice ringing with quiet victory. Did you see Mr. Thorne sign that document? Did you see him? He pointed directly at Julian. Sign it? I did, Finch said, his voice firm. He signed it right in front of me, on the wobbly counter by the fax machine. He joked about the infidelity part. He said something like, "This is never going to matter." Then he paid me the $10 fee in quarters. The courtroom was utterly silent. Dr. Evelyn Reed's $25,000 testimony about ink and pressure loops had just been annihilated by a $10 notary and the memory of an opal ring. "Thank you, Mr. Finch," Marcus said. No further questions. Kincaid's cross-examination was a disaster. He tried to paint Finch as a senile, confused old man. "Mr. Finch, you're on medication, aren't you?" "For my blood pressure, yes." "And your memory. You admit it's not perfect." "It's not. But some things you don't forget. You don't forget a girl with an opal ring telling you she makes her own luck. And you don't forget a young buck so arrogant he pays you in pocket change. I remember them. And I remember that signature." Judge Harding had heard enough. "Thank you, Mr. Finch. You may disconnect." The screen went black. Judge Harding looked down at Julian Thorne. Her expression was granite. "The court finds the testimony of Mr. Gerald Finch to be credible and compelling. The prenuptial agreement dated May 14th, 2010, is hereby entered into evidence as authentic. Mr. Thorne, your previous testimony on this matter is now deeply troubling." Julian's face was ashen. He had lost the first war. "However," the judge continued, "this is not over. The document is real. Now, Mr. Cole, you have to prove Section 3. You have to prove adultery." Julian's head snapped up. His terror was replaced by a flicker of his old confidence. He had lost the battle of the signature. But he knew, with absolute certainty, he could win this one. He and his mistress, Seraphina Vance, had been pathologically discreet. There were no texts, no emails, no hotel receipts. Elena had a real prenup, but she had no proof to trigger it. The trial had now entered its most salacious and most critical phase. The prenup was real. Now, Marcus Cole had to prove what everyone in the courtroom already suspected: that Julian Thorne was divorcing his wife for another woman. That woman was Seraphina Vance. Seraphina was the 28-year-old head of marketing at Auratech. She was everything Elena was not: sharp, ambitious, a digital native, and ruthless in her corporate maneuvering. She and Julian were a power couple in waiting, and they had been meticulous. "There is nothing, Marcus," David Chen said, sliding a depressingly thin folder onto the conference table. They were back in their strategy room. "I've been on this for 6 months. I have 0. No photos of them together outside of work. No reservations. No credit card slips. He doesn't text her from his known phone. She doesn't text him. They communicate through Auratech's encrypted internal server, and those messages are all business. Review the Q3 projections, Serafina. Yes, Julian. It's clean. It can't be, Elena insisted. They've been together for at least a year. I know it. I felt the change in him, the distance, the smell of a perfume that wasn't mine. Baccarat Rouge. Serafina wears it. A perfume isn't proof, Elena, Marcus said, rubbing his temples. We need a hotel receipt, a plane ticket, a photograph, something. He's too smart for that, Chen said. A guy like Thorne doesn't use his own name or his Amex. He uses shell corporations. He uses proxies. He's a ghost. Then we hunt the ghost, Marcus said. David, forget Julian. Focus on her, Serafina Vance. She's 28. She's smart, but she's also young. She's bound to have slipped up. A social media post, a bragging text to a friend. Chen dedicated the next 72 hours to a deep dive into Serafina Vance. Her Instagram was locked down. Her Facebook was pictures of her cat. But on LinkedIn, Chen found a clue. In her bio, she listed herself as a board advisor to a small, obscure philanthropic foundation, the Vance Thorne Philanthropic Fund. Got him? Chen whispered. It wasn't much, but it was the first time their names had been legally linked outside of Auratech. Chen started digging into the fund's financials. It was a shell. It had received one donation, $10 million from an offshore holding company in the Cayman Islands, and it had made one expenditure, a $1.2 million payment to a Swiss jeweler. Why would a charity buy a watch? Chen wondered. He cross-referenced the jeweler, Patek Philippe. He then went back to Serafina's social media. He scoured her tagged photos, not just her own. He found a group shot from an Auratech gala 3 months prior. There, on Serafina's wrist, gleaming under the light, was a watch. He zoomed in. It was a Patek Philippe, a model with a moon phase complication and a diamond-encrusted bezel, a specific, one-of-a-kind, $1 million watch. This is good, Marcus said, looking at the photo, but it's circumstantial. We can prove his shell company bought a watch, and we can prove she has a watch. We can't prove it's the same watch, and we certainly can't prove it was a romantic gift. We need more, Elena said. Her resolve was hardening her. The timid woman from the first day of court was gone. Where did they go? Where did they meet? Chen turned his attention back to Julian. He couldn't find a flight reservation for Julian Thorne and Serafina Vance together. But what about separately? He pulled Julian's private jet manifests. The man flew constantly. London, Tokyo, Dubai. Then he pulled Serafina's commercial flight records. London, Tokyo, Dubai. She was always one day behind him, or one day ahead of him. On paper, they were just 2 executives traveling for business. But then Chen found an anomaly. On April 10th, Julian's jet, a Gulfstream G650, filed a flight plan from New York to St. Bart's, a notorious billionaire's playground in the Caribbean. He was gone for 4 days. There was no conference, no meeting. On April 9th, Serafina Vance flew commercial, business class, from JFK to St. Martin, the international airport closest to St. Bart's. She returned 4 days later, on the same day Julian's jet landed back in New York. He flew private, she flew commercial. They met there, Chen said. They're not stupid. They didn't even fly into the same airport. It's still just a coincidence, David, Marcus said. Kincaid will say she was on vacation, and he was on vacation. Separately. We need to place them together. The hotel, Elena said. They must have stayed at a hotel. He wouldn't, Chen said. He'd rent a private villa. Cash. Or more likely, through another shell corp. Chen spent another day digging. He cross-referenced the Cayman holding company, the one that had bought the watch. He found it was the registered owner of exactly one piece of property, a 15,000-square-foot beachfront villa on St. Bart's. "We have it," Chen said, a rare smile on his face. He didn't just visit a villa, he owns the villa. The same shell company that bought his girlfriend a $1 million watch also owns the private beach house they both vacationed at on the same 4 days. This was the linchpin. In court, Marcus Cole presented his findings. He built the case brick by brick. "Mr. Kincaid," Marcus said, calling Julian's lawyer to the stand as a hostile witness, a rare, dramatic move. "Are you aware your client is the director of a Cayman holding company called JTV Holdings?" I am not privy to all of Mr. Thorne's holdings," Kincaid stammered. "Then let me enter into evidence the incorporation papers. JTV Holdings, Julian Thorne, director. And I'd like to enter into evidence a Patek Philippe receipt for $1.2 million, paid by JTV Holdings. And now, I'd like to call Ms. Serafina Vance to the stand." Serafina Vance walked into the courtroom like she was walking into a boardroom. She was poised, her hair perfect, and she was wearing a crisp white power suit. And on her wrist, for the whole world to see, was the watch. "Miss Vance," Marcus began, "that is an extraordinary timepiece you're wearing. Would you mind telling the court where you acquired it?" "It was a gift," she said, her voice smooth. "A gift from whom?" A family friend." "A family friend. Not by chance your boss, Julian Thorne?" "No," she said, looking right at him. A clean, simple lie. "Interesting, because that watch is a custom Patek Philippe, one of only 3 made, and we have a receipt showing it was purchased by JTV Holdings, a company owned by Julian Thorne. Are you telling this court that you just happen to have an identical, one-of-a-kind watch?" Serafina's composure cracked, just a flicker. She looked to Kincaid, but he had no defense. "Now, Ms. Vance, let's talk about April 10th. You flew to St. Martin, correct?" "I was on vacation." "And Mr. Thorne flew to St. Bart's on the same day, correct?" "I have no knowledge of Mr. Thorne's travel." "So it's just a coincidence that you vacationed on an island 10 miles away from where your boss vacationed? And it's a further coincidence that the private villa he vacationed at is owned by the exact same company that gifted you your $1 million watch?" Serafina Vance was silent. "Answer the question, Ms. Vance. Did you or did you not cohabitate with Mr. Thorne in a private villa in St. Bart's in direct violation of his marital vows?" Serafina looked at Julian. His face was unreadable, but his knuckles were white as he gripped the table. She was trapped. If she lied, she was committing perjury. If she told the truth, she was handing Elena Thorne $3.5 billion. Did you sleep with Julian Thorne, Ms. Vance?" Marcus's voice was like a hammer. "Yes." The courtroom gasped. Julian Thorne closed his eyes. He had been so careful, but he had been brought down by the one thing he couldn't control, his mistress's desire to show off her new watch. "Your Honor," Marcus Cole said, turning to the judge, "we have proven the adultery. The breach of trust clause is now in effect." Judge Harding looked at the wreckage. "It appears you have, Mr. Cole." But as Julian Thorne sat there, a strange, calculating look replaced his shock. It wasn't over. He had lost the adultery clause, but he had one last, desperate card to play. He wasn't just going to lose. He was going to burn the entire company to the ground before he let Elena have it. The victory was short-lived. Marcus and Elena had proven the prenup was real. They had proven the adultery. But now they had to enforce the terms. 70% of all marital assets, and controlling interest in the Passion Project subsidiary, Elysium. And Julian Thorne, backed into a corner, became a dragon. "Your Honor," Bobby Kincaid argued, back on his feet 2 days later, "we concede the adultery. We concede the unfortunate triggering of the clause. However, the division of assets is not as simple as Mr. Cole suggests. 70% of what, exactly? 70% of the marital assets, Mr. Kincaid. It's very clear," said Judge Harding. "But what are the marital assets? Mr. Thorne's net worth is tied entirely to Auratech stock. If he is forced to liquidate 70% of his holdings, the stock will crater. The company will collapse. Thousands of employees will lose their jobs. The board will oust him. She won't be getting 70% of $5 billion. She'll be getting 70% of zero. It's a murder-suicide pact." This was Julian's scorched earth policy. He was threatening to destroy his own company, and thus the very assets Elena was claiming, if she didn't back down. "Furthermore," Kincaid pressed, "the subsidiary, Elysium. It's not a passion project. It is the core of Auratech's R&D. It holds our most valuable patents for the next generation AI. Handing controlling interest to Mrs. Thorne, a woman with no tech experience, is tantamount to handing our greatest trade secrets to a child. It would violate our fiduciary duty to our shareholders. It's impossible." The judge frowned. This was a valid and very serious complication. "Mr. Cole." "Your Honor, Mr. Thorne is inflating his own importance," Marcus argued. "The company will survive. As for Elysium, Mrs. Thorne was not just a co-founder in spirit, as Mr. Kincaid once mocked. She named Elysium. She was present, as Mr. Finch testified, when the original concept was formed. She may not be a coder, but she understands its mission." "It doesn't matter, Your Honor," Kincaid shot back. "We simply cannot and will not allow a hostile, non-technical party to take control of our most valuable IP." "Then what do you propose, Mr. Kincaid?" the judge asked. "A buyout," Julian Thorne said, speaking for himself. All eyes turned to him. His voice was cold, stripped of all emotion. The clauses triggered. "Fine, I'll pay her. I will pay Elena a cash settlement. $100 million. In exchange, she signs a full NDA and waives all claims to Auratech and Elysium stock. It's the only way to save the company." It was a staggering amount of money, but it was a tiny fraction of the $3.5 billion she was owed. "Mr. Thorne is trying to buy his way out of a contract he signed," Marcus said, disgusted. "I'm trying to save my company from a woman who is trying to destroy it out of spite," Julian roared. "Order!" Judge Harding slammed her gavel. "Mr. Thorne, this is not a negotiation. This is a court of law. I am bound by the contract you signed." "Then you will be responsible for the biggest corporate collapse in this decade," Kincaid yelled. The courtroom was at a stalemate. The judge was trapped. She couldn't enforce the prenup without potentially destroying the asset she was trying to divide. That night, Elena, Marcus, and David Chen met. Elena was pale. "He'll do it," she said. "He'll bankrupt the company just to spite me. I know him. He'd rather have nothing than see me win." "He's not just spiting you, Elena," David Chen said, looking at a new pile of documents. "He's been planning this. Not the divorce, but the asset protection. While Kincaid was arguing in court, Julian has been moving things." "What do you mean?" Marcus asked. "I've been tracking the financials of Auratech's subsidiaries. In the last 48 hours since the adultery was proven, he started a complex series of transfers. He's moving Elysium's key patents. He's transferring them from the New York-based subsidiary to a new holding company in Delaware, and from there to another one in Switzerland." "He's trying to hide the asset," Elena whispered, horrified. "He's looting Elysium before he hands me the keys to an empty building." "This is it," Marcus said, his eyes hard. "This isn't just a divorce. This isn't just egregious conduct. This is criminal. This is conspiracy to commit fraud. He is actively violating a court order by moving marital assets." "How do we prove it?" Chen asked. "This is all happening inside Auratech's private servers. It's a digital fortress. We'll never get in." "We don't need to," Marcus said. "He's already given us the key." The next morning, Marcus Cole walked into court with an emergency motion. "Your Honor, we are no longer just arguing about the terms of a prenup. We are alleging that Mr. Julian Thorne is actively committing criminal fraud." Kincaid and Julian laughed. "Baseless slander." "Is it?" Marcus said. "Your Honor, Mr. Thorne and his mistress, Serafina Vance, used Auratech's internal, encrypted servers to conduct their affair and to communicate about their vacations and gifts. We were granted limited access to those servers to prove the adultery, but our forensic team found something else. They found a pattern." Marcus turned to Julian. "You were so meticulous about hiding your affair from your wife. You used the most secure server you had. But you got comfortable. You started using that same encrypted channel to discuss financial matters with Ms. Vance." Serafina Vance, who was sitting in the gallery, went white. "You see, Your Honor," Marcus projected a new document on the screen. "Ms. Vance wasn't just his mistress. She was his partner in this. As head of marketing, she had access to the Elysium Project's branding and IP, and here, in a message dated just 3 days ago, is a message from Julian Thorne to Serafina Vance. J. Thorne, Sarah, the Elysium transfer is in motion. The Swiss entity is Etia Holdings. I need you to move the branding portfolios and all non-patent IP to that server. We need to have the shell empty by Friday, before Harding's final ruling. Svans, understood. The divorce. It's getting bad. Are you sure this is safe? J. Thorne, she can have the company. It's just a name. We're taking the soul. She'll never even know what's gone." It was the smoking gun. Julian Thorne, in his own words, admitting to a conspiracy to loot the very asset he was being compelled by the court to turn over. Julian Thorne stared at the screen. He had been so focused on the adultery, he never imagined his digital communications about business would be used against him. He had been so careful with his personal life, but so arrogant in his professional one. Bobby Kincaid sat down. He put his head in his hands. He was a shark, but he couldn't defend this. His client had not only lied to the court, he had lied to him. "Mr. Thorne," Judge Harding's voice was low, trembling with a controlled rage. "You have perjured yourself. You have committed adultery. And now you have been caught, red-handed, attempting to defraud your wife and this court by hiding billions of dollars in marital assets. You have built a fortress of lies, Mr. Thorne, and it has just collapsed on top of you." Julian said nothing. He just stared at Elena. The look in his eyes was no longer arrogance. It wasn't even anger. It was pure, unadulterated hatred. The encrypted message was the atom bomb. But Marcus Cole wasn't done. The message proved Julian's intent to commit fraud. Now, Marcus needed to prove the act, and he needed to sever Julian from his co-conspirator. "Your Honor," Marcus said, "the petitioner calls Miss Serafina Vance to the stand." Kincaid weakly objected. "She's already testified." "She testified about the adultery, Your Honor," Marcus countered. "Now she must testify about the conspiracy to commit wire fraud. Unless," he added, "Ms. Vance intends to plead the Fifth Amendment, which would be illuminating." Serafina Vance, who was already under investigation for her perjury regarding the watch, had been advised by her own new lawyer to cooperate. She walked to the stand, but this time the white power suit was gone. She wore a simple grey blouse. She looked young, terrified, and utterly alone. Julian wouldn't even look at her. "Miss Vance," Marcus began, his voice sympathetic. "You are in a very difficult position. You were Mr. Thorne's employee. You were also his romantic partner. He held and holds immense power over you, correct?" "Yes," she whispered, "and he used that power to compel you to do things you knew were wrong." "Objection," Kincaid said, leading the witness. "Sustained. Rephrase, Mr. Cole. Ms. Vance, let's look at the message again. I need you to move the branding portfolios." "Did you, in fact, do this?" Serafina looked at her hands. Her lawyer had told her the unvarnished truth. "Julian Thorne will throw you under the bus to save himself $1. He will let you take the fall for this. You are facing 5 to 10 years for corporate fraud. Your only chance is to tell the truth." "Yes," she said, her voice cracking. I initiated the transfer of the files to the Swiss server." "Under whose direction?" "Mr. Thorne's." "And did you know the purpose of this transfer?" I... Serafina looked at Julian. He was staring at her now, a look of such cold menace that she visibly flinched. "Miss Vance?" Marcus pressed gently. He told me it was to protect the IP during the uncertainty of the divorce," she stammered. "To protect the IP, or was it, as he wrote, to empty the shell so that his wife would get just a name? Which was it?" Serafina began to cry. Quietly at first, then in great, shuddering sobs. He said after this was over, we would move to Switzerland. We would run Etia Holdings together. He said she didn't deserve any of it. That I was the one who helped him build Elysium. That I deserved it. He said she was trying to destroy us. It was a total, complete confession. She wasn't just a mistress. She was a deluded co-conspirator, promised a new life in exchange for her help in committing a federal crime. Julian Thorne stood up so violently, his chair crashed to the floor. "You weak, hysterical—" "Mr. Thorne, you will sit down," Judge Harding roared, banging her gavel. "Bailiff, restrain him." A court officer placed a firm hand on Julian's shoulder, forcing him back into his chair. The mask was gone. The sophisticated billionaire was gone. All that was left was a cornered, furious bully. "So, Ms. Vance," Marcus Cole concluded, "to be clear, Julian Thorne directed you to strip the Elysium subsidiary of its most valuable assets, patents, branding, and intellectual property, and move them offshore, out of the jurisdiction of this court, for the specific purpose of preventing his wife, Elena Thorne, from claiming them in this divorce settlement. Is that correct?" "Yes," Serafina wept. "Yes. No further questions, Your Honor." Bobby Kincaid declined to cross-examine. There was nothing to say. He couldn't discredit her. She had just confirmed the written evidence. Any question he asked would only dig the hole deeper. Judge Harding looked at the scene. At the weeping woman on the stand. At the furious, contained rage of the man at the respondent's table. And at Elena Thorne, who sat, poised and calm, watching the empire she had helped build crumble and reform. "Mr. Kincaid," the judge said, her voice dangerously quiet. "Mr. Thorne, we are no longer discussing a divorce settlement. We are discussing the dissolution of a marital estate in the shadow of multiple proven criminal acts. Perjury, conspiracy, fraud." She took a deep breath. "I have everything I need to make my ruling. We will reconvene tomorrow at 10 a.m. for my final judgment. And Mr. Thorne, I am ordering you to surrender your passport to the court today. You are not to leave the city of New York. Bailiff, please escort Mr. Thorne to your office to process that order. We are adjourned." Julian Thorne, the man who owned a private jet, was now grounded. He was a prisoner in his own city. As he was led out, he looked at Elena. She simply held his gaze, her expression not one of triumph, but of profound, weary finality. The final day in court was a tinderbox, the press choking the halls. Julian Thorne entered, pale and sleepless. Elena followed, poised in a simple cream-colored dress, looking for the first time peaceful. Judge Harding entered, and did not open the file. She looked directly at Julian. "I have been on this bench for 20 years, she began, her voice resonating with judicial authority. "But rarely have I seen such a calculated, arrogant, and malicious campaign of deception. You came into this court, and you built a house of lies. You lied about the prenuptial agreement. You lied about your fidelity. And when all of that failed, you attempted to commit a massive criminal fraud." She shook her head. "You fundamentally misunderstood the woman you were married to, Mr. Thorne. You saw her quietness as weakness. You were wrong. She was not a gold digger. She was the one smart enough to bring the pen." Judge Harding then delivered her ruling. This court's judgment is as follows. The prenuptial agreement is valid. The breach of trust clause is triggered. Mrs. Eleanor Thorne is awarded 70% of all marital assets, including Mr. Thorne's stock in Oratech. To prevent the scorched earth defense, Mr. Thorne threatened, "A court-appointed special master will oversee the transfer, making Mrs. Thorne the new majority shareholder." Julian's face was ashen. Furthermore, the judge continued, 100% of the subsidiary Elysium is awarded to Mrs. Thorne. This court orders the immediate repatriation of all intellectual property illegally transferred offshore. Mr. Thorne will provide all encryption keys, or he will be held in contempt. And finally, the judge said, "I am referring this entire case, the perjury, the conspiracy, the fraud, to the U.S. Attorney's Office for Criminal Investigation. This divorce proceeding is over. Mr. Thorne's legal troubles, I suspect, are just beginning." She slammed the gavel. "Adjourned." Julian Thorne sat, a completely ruined man. In the gallery, Serafina Vance was already being quietly approached by 2 federal agents. Elena stood. She walked calmly through the media circus, not saying a word, her opal ring catching the light. She bypassed the limousines and got into a simple sedan. "Where to, Elena?" the driver asked. She looked forward at the city skyline. Her city. "The office," she said. "The real one." In the end, it wasn't just a divorce. It was a complete dismantling of a bully. Julian Thorne didn't just lose his money, he lost his power, his company, and his freedom, with federal charges pending. Serafina Vance, facing her own legal battle, lost her career. And Eleanor Thorne, the woman he dismissed as a co-founder in spirit, became the majority owner of Oratech. She didn't destroy the company. She saved it. She fired the board that had enabled Julian, and she poured new funding into Elysium, the passion project she had helped dream up 15 years ago. She proved that the prenup wasn't an act of greed. It was the ultimate insurance policy. It was a story of truth, patience, and the staggering arrogance of a man who believed his own signature meant nothing. What do you think of this incredible story? Was this justice, or was the prenup too harsh? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. And if you love stories where the truth finally comes to light, make sure to like this video, share it with a friend, and subscribe for more unbelievable true life drama.